Well, hello there folks, this is Liaj, and welcome to a very special video. I have to imagine that if you have found your way to this video, then you are well aware of the big news already, but just for me, I have to say it anyways. As of last night, from the time of recording, at the Game Awards, we received the grand reveal of the next mainline Monster Hunter game. This reveal is for what was previously anticipated by some community members as Monster Hunter World 2, or for those of us old heads, Monster Hunter 6, but now it shall simply be known as Monster Hunter Wilds. And now let's jump right into why you are probably here. We have a trailer to look at. This trailer was dropped right at the end of the Game Awards show, and honestly, I think it is super cool that Monster Hunter has become such a beloved franchise that it got such a prestigious trailer spot. But now about the actual trailer. The trailer has a runtime of just 1 minute and 30 seconds, and admittedly 30 of these seconds are spent on a single shot for the title drop. But let me tell you, in this remaining minute, there is an enormous amount for us to unpack. I have to admit, my first reaction to this trailer was basically spent squealing over the mere existence of this game. However, after watching a few more times, my excitement has only grown because some of the implications this trailer has on the direction of the game are absolutely enormous. So I suppose there's nothing left to do but start going through this trailer. We're going to be breaking this down shot by shot because there is just so much info packed into this. Let's get started. And here it is, the first shot. There are quite a few things that I could point out here, but we will see some of it more closely soon, so we'll start with a few big picture things. First and foremost, this is more creatures in a single place than we have ever seen in a Monster Hunter game, and it's not even close. Before this point, if you were to ever see a herd of the smaller monsters, we would be looking at maybe 4 to 5 on average, certainly staying within the single digits. But now this is a proper herd. This shot very clearly calls to mind a savanna, both from the environment but also from the way we have this group of creatures gathered here around this source of water. Now let's take a closer look at these creatures. Our next shot gives us a closer look at the creatures that make up the bulk of this herd. These fellows seem to resemble armadillos, or perhaps I think the real-world animal that fits them the best would actually be the pangolin. In addition, it very much seems like we have what appear to be two versions of the same species, obviously referring to the fact that two of these have these comically large spikes while the rest of them are nice and smooth. This could be a case where one version of these is the female of the species and one is the male, or perhaps the spiked individuals are the elders of this species. Either way, as we will soon find out, these spiked individuals will serve a pretty important purpose in this herd. One final thing to point out in this shot are these little birds that are just having a nice little ride on the backs of the pangolins. Once again, this is rather reminiscent of a real-world ecosystem, and I think it will become more and more clear that this is exactly what this game is going for. Also, I hope these birds are easier to catch and put in my house than those dang white fuzzballs. And in this next shot, we have a better look of another creature type that was present in the first shot. Here we have what sort of reminds me of a buffalo, but on more of a dinosaur skeleton. In Monster Hunter terms, these could perhaps be classified as a brute wyvern, assuming they aren't just put in the herbivore category. And while these are definitely a different species from the pangolins, we can see here and in the first shot that these creatures are cool being around each other, once again drawing to mind these congregations of different species that you get in real-world ecosystems. Speaking of which, we can spot another species in this shot. Running across the ground, we just see a bunch of little guys. Yep, that's the best descriptor I have for those, little guys. I would most likely guess that these will fall into the endemic life category. Hopefully that means I can snatch them up and keep them. And let's point out one more creature. In the distance we have a flying something. When we actually play this part of the video, we can hear a rather distinct bird call, so perhaps this flying thing is producing that sound. Now, I'm actually curious if this is just a smaller flying monster or if it is actually a sneak peek at something in the large monster tier. In this freeze frame, this bird creature looks like it could either be small and close up or large and far away, but once we move forward, the bird flies behind that tree. This means that our creature is a decent distance away, and while maybe it could still be small monster size, perhaps like the winged drakes from World, it is also possible that it is larger than it seems. Now, right before jumping into the action, we have a nice foreshadowing shot here showing an ominous approaching storm. We can see a bit of lightning flashing in the distance. We'll have a lot to cover with regards to that shortly. But now here we are with our first shot of the player. And of course with this we have the reveal of our brand new chocobo, some sort of bird wyvern mount. Now with regards to our player and our mounts, there is a whole lot that I want to talk about, but I think I want to move forward for now because I want to get through the upcoming scenes first. You see, our player is in a bit of a hurry because... yeah. So here we have another new monster type, and my descriptive skills are really struggling on these. Like, maybe I'm seeing a bit of lion in these, but they seem built like bears. Their red faces somehow make me think of a baboon, and what's going on here? Are these just huge, terrifying eye sockets? At any rate, these fellows are rather large, and there's a lot of them, and I don't think they like us very much. So I guess our hunter's plan here is to use the majestic herd of pangolins as a distraction. And while we're on this shot, we can see a pretty neat detail. All of the spiked individuals in the herd have gone on alert. I think this denotes them as the sort of watchers and or protectors of the herd. More on that soon. Now that the camera has gone behind us, we can actually see that it was not just the big fuzzy guys that we were running from. Approaching very rapidly, we have this massive wall of sand. For a brief moment when I saw the sand wall building up, I thought we were dealing with a sort of localized sand avalanche, as if such a thing even existed, but it quickly became clear that this is just a full-on natural sandstorm. Now before we get into this sandstorm, let's talk a bit about these big monsters first. As we are running through the herd, our pursuers get to work tearing into the poor pangolins. And I couldn't help but notice while looking at the animations of these big guys that I am very much reminded of the monster Gosharag. Upon seeing the builds of these monsters and the way they move, it very much gives me the vibes that these guys share the same general skeleton. Now this leads to a very important question. Are each and every one of these big guys to be considered in the large monster tier? Are we actually running from the equivalent of 7 Gosharags? This, I think, leads us to what could be one of the most major developments in the series' history, and while we don't know the details of how exactly this will work, I think there are a few ways that this could play out. In every past Monster Hunter game, there has always been a huge distinction between large monsters and small monsters. Large monsters, of course, would be your primary quest target, and while some are much stronger than others, you could usually expect an average hunt of one to go anywhere from a few minutes all the way up to the maximum of 50 minutes. Small monsters, on the other hand, are basically just set dressing. Some will bite at your ankles to annoy you, and some are just there for if somebody gets hungry, but all of them without exception will fall with just a few hits from any weapon. Knowing this, what exactly could we say we are dealing with in this trailer? I personally would guess that our pangolin friends will fall into the small monster category, although I'm curious if these spikies are a different story. For the brown Gosharags, on the other hand, I just don't see them giving off small monster vibes. But on the other hand, in any previous Monster Hunter game, it would be unheard of for a large tier monster to be hunting in a pack. Because imagine having to fight 6 monsters at once that could each take about 10 minutes to kill. In fact, in basically every Monster Hunter game, every map could only ever contain a maximum of 3 large tier monsters at one time. So knowing this history, what could this footage mean for the game? Well, I see basically 3 possibilities. The first possibility is that despite looking so scary, these predator monsters are just in the small monster tier and will go down in just a few hits if you actually fought one. I guess that would work from a game design perspective, but it might be a little boring. Now, a second possibility is to compromise a bit. Perhaps these monsters don't have the same HP pool of a normal large monster, but they still take a bit of time to take down. Maybe we could call these medium monsters. And this would make them a substantial threat in a group like this, but at least they would be feasible to fight if we were bold enough. We haven't really ever seen this concept in the previous games, but it could be a good way to balance having a much higher amount of monsters in an area at once. The final possibility is that these predators are in fact all in the large monster tier. Now this is the possibility I am truly actually hoping for, because you know what, it would be terrifying. A thing I have wanted in the Monster Hunter games for so long is for the monsters to be threatening. In one way, this would be a huge departure from all the other past games, but somehow I feel like it would be more in line with the idea of Monster Hunter than ever before. Because sure, you are the hunter, but you can't be expecting to just step into an arena and beat on a punching bag for 5 minutes. I always wanted the games to give you the feeling that you are not at the top of the food chain, and if you wanted to get there, you'll need to be using every tool at your disposal. And so sure, maybe having to fight 7 boss level monsters at once seems impossible, but then again, that is why our hunter is running from them. Perhaps if we wanted to take one of these monsters down, we would need to use some strategy to separate one from the pack, like a hunter, and it could just be that leading these guys into the herd was part of our plan all along. Let us continue. With the sandstorm having engulfed all of us, the whole atmosphere of this area has changed. Not only is this a sandstorm, it is also a thunderstorm, a thunder sandstorm. This is certainly a really cool effect, and I hope that it's hinting that dynamic weather conditions will be a major part of the game. In most previous games, weather didn't really mean much, and I think only World had dynamic weather. As we will see here though, this thunder sandstorm changes quite a bit for us. Starting with the sandstorm part here, obviously this will affect our visibility. I'm curious if there will be other effects to this for our hunters such as limited mobility, but we can't tell from this footage. We can, however, see the neat effect of our hunter and bird getting a nice sandy coating. But now here's the big thing. Because this is also a thunderstorm, lightning strikes are a thing that we have to look out for, and it just so happens that our spiky little friends are literal lightning rods. And this, I am pretty sure, is their actual defense mechanism that they have deployed because the herd is under attack. That is just metal AF. Moving forward, we can truly see how violent this thunderstorm is, with lightning coming down in rapid fire. I'm curious how much of an actual threat it will be to randomly get struck by lightning in this situation. And next we come to see some very cool parkour by our bird mounts. This looks pretty fast and fluid, and I hope this isn't just something we can do in certain set piece areas. Right after jumping around, we've got a shot of us in the air where our bird unfolds its wings and starts gliding. Also in the background, we can see the lightning striking a tall spire, which notably is a formation we've seen dotted around the terrain a whole bunch. I'm curious if this has any relation to the lightning rod pangolins. As we continue gliding, we land on another large rock structure where we finally transition into our sweeping area shots to get our title drop. And this gives us a nice view of our general area, and there is quite a lot to see here. We have of course what could be considered a normal savanna grassland, but the obvious main difference is all the lightning rod structures. And it appears to me that further in the background, the terrain transitions out of the savanna into rocky crags. Also to the right, I wonder if that's a path leading into a proper desert with sand dunes. It does look kinda similar to the path that we originally ran out of when being chased. What's actually interesting too is that for most of the trailer, the ground was very sandy with bits of patchy grass poking through, but during this reveal, all of the sand is blown away at once to reveal the full grassland. I suppose that could have been an effect of the sandstorm passing over. Once again, this makes me curious if things like weather will also be able to change how the landscape looks. Finally, of course, I have to address the centerpiece of this shot, which is this really cool and crazy looking rock formation. Perhaps this is just a natural rock formation that happens to look very cool, but maybe there will be some interesting lore behind it. Because in fact, here comes the logo. Specifically, look at all these ring-shaped motifs. Very interesting indeed. I guess while we're here, let's talk a bit more about this logo. Specifically, this emblem design to the right of the text. So first off, it looks pretty cool, but I want to draw your attention to what appear to be these two dragons intertwined in the emblem. Now, Monster Hunter logos just happen to have a history of featuring various monster motifs in their designs. And while this is not the case for all of them, some have even featured designs that represented the flagship monsters of their games. For a handful of these logos, we can spot some sort of dragon-like motif, but I don't have the analytical skills to link them to any actual monsters. Especially in the recent games, however, we can make some pretty confident links between the logos and the game's flagship monster. For Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, we can very obviously link this logo to Malzeno. And in Base Rise, we can link this logo to Magnum Malo, I think. For Monster Hunter World Iceborne, it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine this logo relating to Velkhana. And look at the logo for Monster Hunter Generations. We have 4 parts depicting the 4 flagships. Probably. Hold on, I got one more. Yeah, now we're talking. So, okay, I don't suppose we can put too much stake in this logo actually representing an in-game monster, but I think it's worth keeping in your thoughts, and if nothing else, this ring motif seems deliberate to the point that I think we could expect to see it popping up in a few places. And finally, this logo is hiding something even more important. Yep, that's right folks, Monster Hunter 6. Oh, did you think I was done? Clearly you weren't paying enough attention to when I said there was a lot more I wanted to talk about with regards to our player in the mount. It's rewinding time! I mean, surely you didn't expect me to just finish my analysis without breaking apart every little piece of gear our player has, did you? Let's pause here first on this close-up. For starters, I like the sort of cowboy boot we have. It definitely calls to mind the idea of being out on the rugged frontier. Also from this shot, we can see a saddlebag for our mount, which gives me a few more thoughts that we will be covering soon, stay tuned. And finally from this shot, since we're taking a closer look at our mounts, we can in fact see that it has scales, which I think would classify it as a sort of bird wyvern. In this next shot from the front, we can get a good look at our bird's face. Very handsome. And on the left here we can see another bag with a large object that sort of looks like a weapon. We will get a better look at this object coming up soon. And now we have a full shot of our hunter so we can see all of his gear. I would imagine that this armor will be some sort of starting armor set, but it does look pretty cool. It makes me feel like this is a design adapted for the desert environment, perhaps featuring this hood and what appears to be goggles to deal with the sandstorms. And here it is, the money shot, our weapon. Now this weapon design has me quite a bit interested. Perhaps you could convince me that this weapon is a greatsword, but I don't know, it seems a bit too small. I also wouldn't quite classify it as a longsword either, seems to be a bit too short and thick. In addition, I would like to draw some attention to what appears to be an additional grip partway up the blade. This could suggest that the weapon could be held with one hand on the handle and one on the second grip, resulting in some rather interesting attack possibilities. Of course, this extra grip could simply be an extra design flourish that doesn't actually affect the weapon's functionality, but I would also find it a bit odd to include these types of flourishes on what is likely a starter weapon. Regardless of if this is a new weapon type or not, I don't think getting a new weapon type in this game will be out of the picture. Now let me fast forward to another good shot of our character. So while we might be covered in sand, we finally have a good look at the object in the right saddlebag. And now I know what this is, that is the stock of a bowgun. Now while there is a chance that all of the saddle gear we have is just decorative, there is a possibility that this means something big. What this could be telling us is that we can choose to bring additional weapons with us on our hunts by packing them in our saddlebags. And here we go again, this leads us into another pretty major set of possibilities for the direction this game could go in. So I'm gonna come out and address the elephant in the room that many of you may have been thinking throughout all of this trailer watching. I think that this game will be open world. If not open world, at the very least, I think we will be looking at wide open zones on a much greater scale than Monster Hunter World. That much I think isn't too hard to imagine given the environments we have been shown. Just from the shots we've gotten, we can see some pretty wide open plains, and we know that the player was in the process of riding in from a different, more deserty area. But specifically the reason I feel like we are looking at a more open world is just based on vibes. For starters, we have a pretty big focus on this mount of ours. Yes, technically we had things to ride on in both World and Rise, but these were for taking us rather short distances. Both the Raider rides in World and the Palamutes in Rise were substantially smaller mounts in comparison to our bird, and I feel like they would be a poor choice for carrying a human across a long distance. In addition, we have all of these supplies stacked up on our mounts. This gives off the vibe that we are in this for the long haul and that we may spend a lot of time away from any sort of civilization. And this might just factor into the gameplay too. So you know how in World and Rise, whenever you ran out of supplies or you wanted to change your weapon, you could just pop back to a camp and access your bottomless stash? Well, what if in Monster Hunter Wilds, your stash is just whatever you can pack onto your bird? Maybe before setting off, you'll have to load your saddlebags up with supplies, and possibly even pack an extra weapon in case you needed to switch up your approach to combat. Honestly, I would absolutely love this, because there has always been a bit of dissonance between the ideas of wanting players to prepare properly for their hunts, but also giving them the accessibility to restock their items. And if this system is implemented in the way I'm thinking, it might just satisfy both of these conditions in a really cool way. I've thought a lot about where exactly I've wanted the Monster Hunter series to go in the future, and honestly, just from what we've seen so far, it looks like it's doing everything that I've wanted. Of course, in the grand scheme of things, we still know next to nothing about the final product, but my hype levels are already dangerously high. I am a little sad to see that we won't be getting this game until at least 2025, but if it means we're going to get a highly polished product, then I will happily wait as long as I need to. Plus, that also gives us plenty of time to play Dragon's Dogma 2. Listen, it's going to be real good and all of you should play it. I think I'm actually going to be making a video about that soon. Of course, I do hope to try to start putting out a bit more Monster Hunter content in the future too. Whenever we receive more substantial information about Wilds, I'll try my best to be right there covering it with everyone. For now, however, I had to rush like crazy to get this video out within a relevant time frame, so I think I need to take a bit of a breather. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.